Hi friends, hope you're all doing well. Today we are going to bring to you this wonderful conversation that I'm going to have with Chitra, who is a certified hypnotherapist, hypnobirthing practitioner, and a childbirth educator here in Netherlands. She has over 15 years of experience in helping new parents go through this wonderful maternity journey and giving them a positive birthing experience. Let's talk to her and know more about it. Hi Chitra, thank you for joining us today. Can you share a little bit about your journey into this hypnobirthing and childbirth education? Like what inspired you to get into this space?
Thank you for having me, Janani. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be part of your YouTube channel. I actually have a background in corporate human resources, but it was the move to the Netherlands and I was completely in awe of this whole Dutch maternity system. So I had also had a child by then, and I sort of looked into the modalities that I'd like to be part of in terms of, labor and birth. And that's how I forayed into the birthing world. I trained myself as a Lamaze childbirth educator from Los Angeles in the US. And then I trained as a hypnobirthing practitioner so that I could actually start working with couples, expectant parents in the Netherlands so that they can have an empowering childbirth experience.
So that brings me to the next question, Chitra. So what is hypnobirthing? Like from a layman's point of view, how can I understand hypnobirthing?
We say that fear is the enemy of the birthing room. When somebody thinks about labor and birth, they're always worried about how am I supposed to actually take care of my contractions, how painful the contractions can be. So there's a lot of anxiety around it. Hypnobirthing is one of the modalities that I trained in from the Hypnobirthing Institute in the US, established by Marie Mongan. She's no longer alive. She passed away a few years ago. She basically was a hypnotherapist and she wanted to make use of hypnotherapy tools in the birthing room to help her daughter have her own birthing experience. So when it comes to labor and birth, there is a lot of fear around how to manage these contractions. So when women are so worried about giving birth because of pain, how can we make use of, some of these tools to help us cope with pain and discomfort?
Very important to, be stress-free and calm and relaxed.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. When you're in the laboring room, the more stress hormones you produce, the more harder it becomes, to be able to actually cope with these contractions and how painful these contractions can be. I'll give you another example. If you have to run a marathon, you can't basically wake up one morning and say, today I'm going to run 42 kilometers. It's just impossible. You really have to have a plan. First of all, you need to understand whether you like the run part of it or not. Right from having proper gears, right from wearing your shoes to getting out and getting into the rhythm of how you run. When somebody is attempting a marathon, they never really run a full 42 kilometers. You attempt the 42 kilometers only on the day of your run. It's the same way when it comes to giving birth. You can't basically wake up one morning and say, okay, today I'm going to give birth. Well, some people do, but I think it becomes a lot more harder because as much as it's physical, it's also emotional and it's mental. You really have to have the mental strength to be able to go through what happens in the laboring process. And labor can unfold in the way it unfolds. We'll never know whether it's going to be a 10-hour labor or 60 hours labor. We don't know. So for that, you need to have some of these tools. So that's why hypnotherapy tools has been incorporated as part of childbirth education so that couples, and I've also worked with single mothers, for example, they can prepare themselves not only physically, but also emotionally, psychically, so that things sort of unfolds in a much more coherent way rather than have a lot of stress and anxiety.
So when I hear these words hypnotherapy and tools, I always go back to these movie scenes where there is a doctor who is with a pendulum trying to hypnotize the patients. Is it very similar to this?
Actually, it's a very, very good question. When you think about in the late 80s and 90s, people who've been using hypnosis, they've had a very bad reputation. Hypnotherapy is actually a little bit more about mindfulness. It's about how you can actually condition your mind in a lot of ways to take care of yourself. For example, what is meditation? When you sit by yourself with all these different, thoughts that you have. And in hypnotherapy, we use a lot of suggestive languages. For example, when you and I are sitting and having a conversation this way, we're using the logical part of the brain. So you are who you are and I am who I am. And there is a reason as to why we are talking about it logically. Whereas when it comes to meditation or when it comes to hypnotherapy, you're not using the logical part of your brain in a lot of ways. You're making use of the right side of the brain, which is more emotional, a little bit more vulnerable, open to suggestions which you're normally not in the normal waking level. Because we're talking in the normal waking thinking level, we're using the logical part of the brain, where I am Chitra and I am who I am, and I'm sitting and talking to you as Janani. Whereas if you have to sort of be in that meditative space, the same way as, if you're doing yoga, for example, the moment you actually be on a mat and when you're trying to do the different asanas, the different postures, or even, for example, when you're lying down with yourself, with your own body and with your own thoughts, that's also being in a very meditative space, right? So hypnotherapy as tools, there are different tools that we actually use. For example, the breathing techniques. We do visualization as guided imagery. So we can, sort of get the people to visualize a lot of things. And also relaxation techniques, which is recorded in somewhat like in a hypnotic way to sort of put you to sleep. We use some of these deepening techniques that you can actually work with your partner, for example, in hypnobirthing. And also affirmations. We always think about positive affirmations. Anything that's positive, that is going to be used over and over again, that can give you the strength and the determination to go through something as hard as giving birth. I think that's really fantastic. So these tools sort of like help you stay calm. So I can't put you to sleep and get your bank account details and password, for example, right? So that is not hypnosis. Hypnosis is also self-hypnosis to a point where you feel comfortable exploring the right side of your brain, which is a little bit more emotional and a little bit more vulnerable, right? Yeah. So I will never be able to put you to hypnosis where anything untoward can happen. I can take you to a point of making you feel relaxed and calm. So being in that sleep-like state or a meditative state or a trance-like state where you're open to suggestions which will relax you rather than make you feel anxious. So that is the idea behind hypnotherapy and hypnotherapy tools.
So I understand this hypnobirthing concept does a lot to our mental and emotional state. Yeah. But in a labor room, what does it do physically to our body?
Okay, very good question. See, what happens when we have anxiety? Anxiety is nothing but, the stress hormones, as what we call as the adrenaline and the cortisol. These hormones that get secreted in our body, that is pushing us to a stage of something bad or negative is going on in your body and you need to do something about it. We call these gut hormones as the second brain, just as how logical we are and our brain is like a guiding light for a lot of situations. Our gut hormones are also the guiding light in a lot of these situations. So the idea is, if you're going to be anxious and stressful in the laboring room, that's going to shut down your whole endocrine system in our body where it produces some of these perfect concoction of hormones. We go into this mode of flight, fright or freeze response to perceived danger. And the perceived danger, we don't call it as danger, it's perceived by your brain thinking something bad or negative is going on. The same thing that would happen if you have to bungee jump. So what is very important, the moments that we actually go to the emergency room of feeling distressed, how can we come out of that, being in that state? So we can't completely eliminate it, but can we shrink it so that you feel more stronger to be able to go through these contractions?
So basically what I understand is with stress, the body is going to slow down the
whole process.
Whole process of delivery.
It'll slow down or
and
it might
also maybe.
Yeah, and it shuts down.
Yeah.
We're only humans. We will feel the stress, but it's really important for us to come out of it. That's the idea behind hypnotherapy.
Chitra, what do you think about the Dutch maternity system? Because for me, when I knew I was pregnant and I was checking about this system, I was totally shocked to know that majority of the people here, the Dutch people, they go for home births. How is this happening here and how is hypnobirthing a useful tool in this space?
Actually, it's a very good question. The Dutch actually are very proud of, how they've actually kept this long-standing tradition of 500 years, keeping the birth as normal and as physiological as possible. They call it as their national treasure in a lot of ways. The idea is that the birth doesn't necessarily have to be a very medicalized event. It is a normal, natural process of life. They've sort of set it up in such a way, they have 3 different degrees of care. So if you fall pregnant and if you're a healthy mother carrying a healthy baby, you first go to a local community midwife. They become your primary care provider. They're called as a Verlooskundigen. They have a local practice called as a Verlooskundigen Praktijk. You will probably have about 4 or 5 midwives in that midwifery practice, and then you start consulting with them. And then there's something called as a secondary care. They have clinical midwives in the hospital. For whatever reason, if birth becomes a bit more medical, then you're also moved to the medical system where you can be part of the clinical midwives in the hospital to be able to give birth in the hospital. Then there's the tertiary care where you actually see obstetricians and a team of obstetric care only if you fall under high-risk pregnancy and something is going on with the mother or the baby, where you have to again, be under the care of obstetrician. Obstetricians are like gods. They'll come and bless you only if there is an absolute need. Otherwise, you don't necessarily have to. The midwives here are well well trained to help you give birth the way you'd like to. It's actually a very good question about home birth as well. If you look at, like you and I coming from India and how the system is set up here, and I also trained and lived in the US, and I also lived in West Africa, birth is over a period of 100 years. It has become more and more medicalized, right? To a point where we are so worried about labor and birth that we are even willing to actually have an option of going in for a C-section right away, simply because we're scared of giving birth. Whereas birth doesn't have to be very scary, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a medicalized event if the mother is healthy and the baby is healthy. So the system is set up in such a way that everything physiologically, if it is normal, then you're expected to give birth with your midwives. Netherlands was one of the safest places to give birth, but also in terms of home birth, you can choose whether you'd like to be at home if it is an unmedicated birth, or if you decide to take a pain medication where you have to be in what we call as, being in the ZOC clinic or the polyclinic with an anesthesiologist in the hospital to be able to give birth. You don't even have to make those decisions at this point in time. The system works in such a way, it's a very collaborative system. For example, your Dutch midwife will never say that, oh, you need to do this or you need to do that. Whereas where we come from, a doctor will tell you, you need to do this, you need to do that, right? It's a very top-down approach that we're talking about when we come from India or from the US or from Australia, for example. Whereas here, it's more about how can we work with each other. It's a very collaborative way. And the Dutch are also firm believers of personal responsibility and freedom. So you're supposed to do all your research and come back and ask your midwives with a lot of questions. And that's also the reason why childbirth preparation is very, very important. If you don't know what your rights are, then it becomes harder to be able to navigate. If you walk into any of the hospitals here, they'll always give you options of would you like this or would you like that? And you're looking at them thinking, why are you asking me? You should be telling me this. But the system is very different here. You have to collaborate. And for you to be able to collaborate, it's really important that you prepare yourself. So not only physically and emotionally, but also understanding your birth rights so that it becomes easier for you. The system sort of works in such a way that they have to navigate you to, a different setup if you don't want unmedicated birth. But it's not that it's not possible. But for you to have that information, you need preparation. And that's where I come into picture, whether it is a normal childbirth preparation course or whether you're making use of this hypnobirthing as hypnotherapy tools. It is a very comprehensive childbirth preparation. So the classes are also usually a mix of theory and practice. So there is a little bit of theory and then everything else is also about the practical tools.
So in my personal experience, Chitra, so when I was going through this pregnancy, my thinking and level of thoughts was only until the due date, only until the delivery. But after delivery, when I had my baby in the hands, that's when I realized there is a bigger door that has opened, which is very challenging, called the postpartum. What are your thoughts about postpartum and how can hypnobirthing help new mothers?
It's a very, very good question, Janani. I think it's very important for us to talk about postpartum. A lot of the times when we are pregnant, we think that, we give birth and our work is actually done. But that's not how it works, right, when it comes to parenting. It's really important for us to understand that as much as it's a journey that starts with pregnancy, there is also another journey as postpartum and parenting that actually comes along. And what is very important and necessary is the support of your partner. Having the support of your partner in preparation for your, labor and birth, and anybody else whom you think that can be part of your support system. The moment you give birth, they give you the baby and say goodbye to you, right? It's not like, you're recovering from a surgery. It's like you've given birth to a baby. You don't have the time to lie down because you have to start this journey of breastfeeding, understanding the baby. There is a newborn, making sure that the baby is actually absolutely okay and safe. A lot of the times as a society, we expect mothers to know everything, as soon as the birth happens. That's not how it is. It is a very, very new journey for parents, especially the mother. So we call the postpartum period as mothering the mother. When we take care of the mother, she will take care of the baby. It's as simple as that. But we forget the mother and we are focusing so much more on the baby. Of course, the baby is new and we've got to focus on the baby. But I always think that it's really important to take care of the mother. Even in the Netherlands, you only get 12 weeks of, postpartum. So the total maternity leave is only 16 weeks. And I think personally, it's too cruel to expect a mother to get back to work after 12 weeks. What we consider, from the perinatal point of view, postpartum is the first 2 years of baby's life, right? The first 2 years is considered as postpartum. So the more we actually take care of the mother, making sure that the mother is actually taken care of by giving her good food, making sure that she's well nourished, making sure that, people come around to hold the baby so that she can rest and sleep, making sure that, she gets enough postpartum massages, making sure she's been taken care of like a queen. breastfeeding, for example. Only when she recovers from this raw, intense process of giving birth can she be there for the baby and for the rest of the family. So for postpartum as well, when you think about some of these hypnotherapy tools that you learn in hypnobirthing, can actually make you feel so much more calmer. I won't say again that it's going to be an easy task, but I think it's really important for us to make use of these tools again, whether it is the breathing exercises or some of the relaxation exercises that you can actually make use of to take a quick 10-minute nap, because you can say goodbye to that 8 hours of sleep. Your sleep will be broken.
And I think the Kramzorg is also one of the best things that the Dutch government
Absolutely. If you give birth in the Netherlands, the first week after you've given birth to the baby, you have a maternity nurse called the Kramzorg who would actually come home and help you sort of like get into the journey of parenthood. It is a very different process, and even if you're thinking that why are these Dutch so raw and wild that they are actually sending me back home after I've given birth 2 or 3 hours later, the belief is again that you recover much better in your own bed, in your own room, rather than being in a hospital sterile space where somebody's actually helping you with the baby and giving the baby back to you. Whereas at home in your own space, somebody comes in as a maternity nurse and she looks at your lifestyle, she looks at how your house is sort of set up, and she can give you tricks and pointers about how to hold the baby, how to change the diaper, how to bathe the baby, make sure that the mother is actually breastfeeding, making sure that the mother is actually recovering from whether it is a C-section scar or whether it is something has gone on with your perineum and you've had a cut or you've had stitches. I think and also starting this whole journey with breastfeeding as well. I think having the Kramzorg is a blessing, and no other country in the world has this kind of service ever. So the Netherlands has done it really well.
Hats off to the Dutch. That's a lot of information so far. So tell us about Akriti, and where do you come into picture?
Akriti, well, in Sanskrit means to begin. So that's the name of my company. And I started Akriti about 15 years ago. Well, this summer it'll be 15 years. I offer different kinds of courses as birth preparation for couples to be able to. There are different formats that I use. For example, the hypnobirthing one is for 15 hours in total. So we meet 3 hours every chunk. So every week we meet for, say, 5 times. So that's 15 hours. I also teach for people who don't want hypnotherapy tools, who just want a very pragmatic, straightforward course where they say, I'm not too worried about any of this. I only want a pain medication. Give me this information alone. So that's also another course that I actually teach. That's in 4 weekly format. That's only for 10 hours. But there are also a lot of people who go for a 1-day course, which is short, crisp and clear. So it can be a bit more intense, but those kind of different types of services that I actually offer.
So you work with clients on a personalized way as well.
So a lot of the times I do group courses, so that it's also a nice way as part of the community. They can actually meet up with other couples as well. So that's how you sort of build your own support system, because we are all expats or migrants living in this country. So I think that's very important. So I also run like the support group on WhatsApp. Until they give birth, they can always reach out to me so that I can help them with anything else, any other questions, even after the course is actually over. But after the course is over, then we sort of do a little reunion with the babies. But after that, they have their own friends. They've made their friends in that group, and they sort of meet up, and I keep receiving after the first birthday, second pregnancy, they come back for second pregnancy for a course or as a refresher, and then they continue to do that. So I've had plenty of these groups where they're continuing to actually be friends. So I think that kind of support system is also very helpful. And the other thing that I also have for people, whether you are doing a course, which I think is essential, I think it's very important, but reading good literature, like reading good books, related to pregnancy and birth, related to postpartum, what kind of help and support that you really need, having those thought process and having conversations around it, because you basically can't wing it. You really have to prepare yourself. Otherwise you're in deep trouble when it comes to postpartum. And also I have my own podcast called Baby Ahoy, which is available on iTunes and Spotify. It's also available on my website. I have about 30 episodes of birth stories from the Netherlands, because if you simply Google it, I think it's going to be harder, because the internet is going to throw you a lot of difficult stuff. I think having a good preparation is key.
So if you are expectant parents in the Netherlands and you want to know what Chitra has to offer, then please reach out. We will leave all the links in the description so that you can check it out for yourself. So thank you so much, Chitra, for a lot of information that you've shared. It's very insightful for me as well as a new mother here.
Thank you so much for having me, Janani. It was such a pleasure. Thank you for making me part of your YouTube channel.
Pleasure is ours.
Hope you found this session really informative and insightful. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe to this channel.